Hi, in this lecture we will learn how to use plsql records. If you are familiar with some other languages, maybe it's easier for you to understand this structure. Records are very similar with the structures in C or C++ languages, or maybe like the objects as some parts in an object-oriented programming language. Actually, objects are a bit different, but the similarity is they both can have different types of variables in it. We can think records as containers including the same or different types of variables. Actually, records are just like a row in a table. You can store a whole row in a record, or you can create your own record structure. You will understand better when we make examples. Let's think about an employee. An employee has a name, salary, hire date, etc. These are all related data for an employee. If we want to use them all, we can either create some scalar variables for all the data of the employee or create a record for it. If we use record for only one employee, there is not any difference than using scalar variables. As a difference, maybe we can consider that all the variables in a record are related with each other and all are in one box. Besides, we can add another record inside of a record. This is also useful sometimes. But records are really meaningful when you use them with collections. That will be the main difference of records from the scalar variables. Because you cannot create 10 scalar variables for each employee, but you can create one record and use that for all the employees. We will see that in collections lesson better. Great. Now let's open up how to use a record. We know that a record can have one or multiple values. These values can be at the same data type or with different types. We can even have another record inside of a record. In this schema, we can see that we have a record including 5 variables in it. Employee ID and salary columns are number, first name and last name are character, and hire date is a date type. Just like in our table design. We can have as many variables as we wish, and all data types of a table is valid. Besides, we can add different types of variables into our records, like adding another record. We will see that. When we declare a record, all variables in it are null by default. But we can initialize it while creating, or we can define it as not null. We can create our records in 2 ways. The simple one is just pointing a database table structure. We know how to get a type in a scalar variable. For example, employees.salary person type. Just like this one, we can say that employees row type. We use table name %row type this time. When we type that, we get all of the columns types of a row into one record and in one step. No need to specify one by one. This is very simple but really efficient way. We generally use that. By the way, r_name is our record's name in here. You can name it r_like here, or you can use Oracle's naming convention. For example, emp_record or emp_rec. It's up to you. One more advantage of this usage of record is maintenance. I mean, when the data type in the table changes, your code will not affect badly on that because we get the type dynamically with that way. Another advantage is we can do some easy DML operations. We generally use that when we want to deal with whole row type. But as I said, with using that, we get whole type of a record. For example, we have 11 columns in employees table and we allocate 11 variables when we use that. What if we don't need that? What if we need less variables or a different structure? In this time, we use the second way. The second way is we specify our variables one by one into our record. This is a bit more difficult way, but we need that generally because we may need to create our own type that is not there in a table, or maybe because we do not need to get all the columns in my record. I need just 3 of them, for example. For this way, we declare our own type first. In the first way, we use the type of a table with calling table name %row type. But this time, we need to create our own type first. How do we do that? We write type keyword to specify that this is a new type. Then our type name. We can name that like t_name or your own convention. Then we write our is and record keywords to specify that this is a record, because type is a larger subject. We can create many different types. Records is only one of them. We will see more types later in that course. Okay, then inside parentheses we specify our variables. We can write any type of PLSQL variables in here. One exception is reference cursors. We haven't seen this yet, just keep that in mind. We can write any PLSQL types except ref cursors. And we can declare as much variables as we wish. But there must be at least one variable in it. In a variable area, we can use some features with our variable types. What are they? We can use all PLSQL variable types in this area. Besides, we can use person_type attribute to declare a variable based on a column type or another variable type. We can declare our variable as a row record with %row type. Furthermore, we can declare our variables as not null, or we can assign default values to them. So how do we reach or assign them? We write record name dot variable name. Now, I think that's enough for the record introduction. Let's make some examples then. Let's start with the easy way to create a record with using %row type attribute. As we learned, %row type creates a record with the whole structure of a table row. Let's go on then. Let's start with the easy example. Our employees %row type. Now, we have a record holding whole data types of the employees table as variables. We will understand better now. Let's continue. Now, let's see something new. As we created a record with exactly the same structure of our employees table, we can select whole row into my record. Let's see now and speak then. Select all the columns into r_emp from employees, where employee ID is equal to 101. As we can see, we could copy whole row into my r_emp record, because our record has exactly the same structure with the same order of variables. But the main point in here is our select statement must return only one row. If it returns more than one, you will have an error, because a record can get only one row. Every record can get only one level or one row values. If you want to store more than one row, you should use collections instead of records. Great. Now let's see if we could get the data of the employee 101 into our record. How do we do that? We see our values with record name dot variable name. But what are our variables? We did not write anything. Our variables has the same names with the columns in our employees table. We have all the column names with column data type and with the same order in our record. Now let's output it. r_emp dot first name, for example. And our end keyword. All right, our code is ready. Let's run it. As we can see, we have the name Nina. Now, let's change our DBMS output to see if we could get the whole row. Let's say concatenation and a space. Let me copy r_emp. rm.lastname, and let's say earns rm.salary, and hired at rm.hiredate. Let's run it again. Oops, we have a typo. Let me clear up here and run again. Perfect. As we can understand from here, we get the whole row in one step with only one select into a record. Pretty simple and pretty fast way. So, can we assign different values to our record variables? Yes. Now let's update our salary value to 2000 and see what happens. rm.salary is equal to 2000. Let's run it again. As we can see, we can update the value. Now, let's see some invalid assignments. For example, let's change the salary to a character value. For example, X. When we run that, we can see that we had an error because our salary column is a number type in our employees table, and so it is number in our record too. Let's now comment that assignment and check what if we delete the where clause. Let's run it. As we can see, we had an error. Our query must return only one row value. Great. It's easy to use with %row type attribute. What if we need a record that does not have any equal structure with a table? Or what if we need only 3 columns of a table? In that time, we can create our own record type. Let's turn back to our slide and talk on that. With that way, we define a variable of a new record type one by one. Each variable must have a unique name in the record, but another record can have the same named variable. No problem on that. In here, we can have any plsql scalar variables like numbers, dates, etc. Besides, we can use person type to get another variables type or a rows type. Or we can have another record with using %row type to copy a table structure. Or we can use not null to specify that it cannot be assigned to null and default keyword to assign a default value. When we complete creating our record type, we need to declare a record because we can think a type just like a number type, for example. It cannot hold any data. But when you create a variable with that type, it can have data with that type now. Now, let's create a record type and a record to see how to do that. Now in this example, we used only 4 columns of our employees table, but we created a record holding all the column types of the table in it. We have many unnecessary variables in it. It takes memory for nothing. We don't need that. So it will be better to create our own type then. Now it's time to create our own record type. Let's comment rm record in our example. And create our own type first. Type t_amp is record and first name it's varchar2 employees dot last name person type. We used person type to have exactly the same type with our last name column. Salary employees dot salary person type and hire date, it's a date. Now let's comment our select into clause and make some assignment first. Our amp that first name is equal to Alex and salary is 2000 again, and our amp that hire date is equal to, let's say, January. I did not assign any value for the last name to see what happens. So no need to change the DBMS output. Great. Now let's run and see what happens. We have an error. Let's check the script output for the error. The identifier rmp.firstName must be declared. Perfect. I intentionally got that error. We have this error because we did not create any record. Let's look at our code again now.